The Oregon City Transportation Advisory Committee meeting before January of 2020 will come to order. Kim, would you call the roll, please?
Yep. Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Atkinson?
Here.
Mr. LaSalle?
Here.
Mr. McEnroe?
Here.
Mr. Jessic?
Here.
Mr. Simmons?
Here.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the minutes. Is there anyone who has anything they want to mention about the minutes? Anybody want to put
I move to approve the minutes of November 19th, 2019.
seconds?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Passed. They're good minutes. Let's see. Agenda analysis. Anybody wish to do anything to the agenda? Not hearing anything. Citizen comment. No citizens in the audience that are not meant to be here. New business discussion. Holcomb Boulevard. I believe we have some people here who are going to report on what they've noticed about speeds and such on Holcomb Boulevard. And I'll please take over, state who you are and what you represent so everybody knows that the blue uniforms actually are ours.
Good evening. Captain Sean Davis. I'm the operations captain here at Oregon City Police Department, and I brought along Sergeant Justin Young. He's our traffic sergeant. So I was going to talk about a little bit about Holcomb Boulevard. I know we've had some complaints about speed, talk about reducing the speed limit. We've been in meeting with the neighborhood association up there and hearing their concerns. So it's been talked about that when Public Works maybe puts out their trailer, or when we put out our trailer, people see that trailer and either they slow down or they do sometimes speed up. So we have a covert speed measuring box that does all the speeds and counts the vehicles and stuff. So working with Public Works, we decided to put that up there and see what the different results were. So you have the results that were presented. The first one we put out was on Lower Holcomb Boulevard between Swan and Hunter, and that was for the week of December 19th through December 26th. As you can see, it picked up speeds of 35,000, almost 400 cars. Those cars were picked up speeds going both ways. For that area, the minimum speed that we saw was 10 miles an hour with an average speed of 37 miles an hour. And the 85th percentile was 43 miles an hour. That Holcomb there is a 40 mile an hour zone. We did see a few people that I would say were pretty egregious, one at 72 miles an hour. So we've had our community service officer analyze the data so our traffic team can be more efficient up there rather than just being random patrols. And we found out that overall, there's approximately 1.17% of the vehicles doing 50 or over, with the majority of them about 1% between 50 and 54. So we can figure out the times based on the data that we pull, and we realized that between 1 and 3 p.m., specifically 2 p.m., is the highest. We see the highest violators for speed. So they're spending some time up there and focusing in that area at that time. We also then put the box the next week from December 27th to January 3rd on the upper part of Holcomb near Winston. We saw 24,000 vehicles. We saw more speeding up here, which is, it gets more towards the county. So I don't know why people are speeding up there, but we found out that there's 2 time frames. 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. are the biggest when people speed the most, and approximately 2.6% are 50 or over.
A question?
Yeah.
Were you able to determine direction?
I was just going to ask that. Yeah.
This doesn't do directions.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
But we did see more. There's a little bit more people. The 85th percentile up there is 44 miles an hour, with the average miles an hour of 36.85. So of the speeding vehicles, we're only seeing about 2.6% that are 50 or over. So we've been able to spend some time up there, our traffic team, and focusing on the 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., and they've got some been very successful at that. And then lastly, we've had up in the Barlow Trail neighborhood, we've had a lot of complaints with the new houses up there and speeding vehicles. So we just put that up January 8th through the 15th. And we saw 3,600 vehicles, and again, that's both ways, coming and going. And it was up off Barlow. The average speed up there was only 19 miles an hour, with the 85th percentile of 24 miles an hour. So the highest speeder was 35. So 10 over will look very fast in the neighborhood. But overall, the vehicles were going within this, lower than the speed limit of 25.
Was this where we were putting the speed hump? Is that where we put this? Okay.
I think it's close. I don't know.
I don't know where Public Works put that up. So we have to, the box we use hangs from like a light pole, and it's about 40 pounds. So they put it up there, but it was in about the same area where they were putting up the radar trailer. And so when they would take this down, they would then go put up the radar trailer. And so I've been working with Jason Thornburg, but he's not here tonight, but I don't know what his results are to see if there's a difference. But their trailer only measures one way, and so their vehicle, the amount of vehicles they're going to see is different.
But the work is still, so these are specific results to the locations that we wanted to measure speed.
Correct.
The question about whether or not the data we get through the radar signs where it tells you your speed, we've yet to correlate the two as far as we can report tonight anyway. Jason may have done some work on that, but that's still forthcoming because we're curious, do people really slow down for that or speed up, or I think maybe a little both. But
yeah, I think some people want to see how fast they can get that registered too, but overall I think most people will slow down when they see it, so it's a good deterrent. This, they have no idea it's even out there, so it's measuring vehicles at their normal driving behavior.
Okay.
And then Sergeant Justin Young's been up there, and he's in charge of the traffic team if you have questions about the traffic enforcement, but it's one of a regular rotation that we do to monitor speed.
Kind of eye-opening. I live up there, and
Yeah.
people have been complaining to us for years and years about speeders on Holcomb Boulevard, yet these reports so far show that they're the average is very, very close to the speed limit.
Yeah, and I think anyone that lives in a neighborhood, if they see a car go by that's, 5-10 miles an hour over the speed limit, it looks fast.
Yeah.
And there are some cars that are doing that, and that's where we're focusing on, but the majority of the cars are driving well within the speed limit.
Would it be fair to say one probably remembers the one that attracted your attention more than the ones that you didn't see? That you didn't notice?
What's that?
Would it be fair to say that you remember more the ones that were, shall we say, ripping versus the ones that are just...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I live in a neighborhood, and when a car goes by fast, I'm like, wow, that car is definitely going over the speed limit. But then if you take it back and see, the majority of the cars are really going the speed limit. So it's, for this device, it's very good for us because we can break it down, have it analyzed, and our analysts can show us exactly the time period that we should be up there to be the most effective and have the best outcome. So that's what we're doing right now.
I think the other thing is noise. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of the younger generation likes these muffled vehicles, and they sound really loud, but they really don't move like they sound.
It's not just the younger ones. I live on 5th Street, and some of the younger ones you're talking about have gray hair.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's multi-generational now?
But it's one of our traffic officers, John Fetzer. I don't know if you met him, but he's up there quite a bit. And he was doing it before this was out just to kind of see where the speeds were. And he said the lower side, there wasn't many speeders. He would occasionally get some that were faster than, the 40 miles an hour. But he said when people are going up that hill of Holcomb, trying to get up past Swan, they're accelerating to maintain that speed. So it does sound fast, although they really weren't going fast. But again, we do have an occasional person that's speeding. About 1% to 2% of the vehicles are speeding. I would say pretty egregious. If you're going 10 plus over, I mean, it could be pretty serious. I mean, stopping distance increases and your perception.
Well, next month, Park Place has neighborhood meeting, general meeting, and I'll take this information to all the people and let them know what you found. John, if you find out any more about that other study you were,
Oh, yeah.
would you
I'll
pass
let you
it to
know.
me as quick as you get it so that I can take it to the meeting also?
Okay.
And when I was in high school, I had the loudest V8 pipes in the city of Portland. I was proud of it.
Were those the cherry bombs without the
No,
lug
these
force?
were, I had a 1950 Oldsmobile with headers coming off of both sides right into two burned out glass packs. I knew they were burned out because I burned them out myself.
That was easy. You burned them out the first time you used them.
Well, I just poured oil on them.
Anyway, moving on.
Plans for the speed hump are still
Yes,
going in.
yes, Mr. Anderson?
So you said that your analysis was allowed you to figure out what was the most opportune time to be there.
Yes.
So how does that stand up over time within the department in terms of, is it something that gets regularly scheduled, whether it's once a month or once a week, and how do we know when that stopped, or if you have an intent to stop that?
I'll field that. So like Captain Davis had said earlier, we were doing much more sporadic, much less focused, very random patrols for speed monitoring and enforcement up there. What this data does is it allows us to be a little bit more surgical, a little bit more deliberate. And with the concerns up on Holcomb, as well as, and in addition to concerns within other neighborhood areas within the city, we were able to have more of kind of a focused enforcement approach. Off the top of my head, I think we've been up there about 12 times for different missions at different times. And like Captain Davis had said, the amount of really egregious violators is none. It was none during our hours. And so that we were able to see. It may be happening during those hours, the days that we're not there. But nonetheless, do we have a regular Tuesday at 9 in the morning that we're going to be at the upper area? No, we don't. And maybe through some of this data, and when the stuff is compared with Public Works, it definitely might be able to tell us, hey, they're headed out toward the county or they're coming down the hill. But once we're able to get this data and really continue to focus it, we're just going to continue going up there in the hours that this is saying our biggest violators are at.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did have one question in relation to this, and was that is the plans moving forward for the neighborhood association on that speed hump?
Yeah, so Brian Cersey, one of the residents from Barlow who attended our attack meeting, he's been communicating with Jason Thornburg a fair amount. So I think they were, last I read, going out, they're getting some more quotes for the work. But yes, that is still moving forward. As you might imagine, with paving work like that, they need a whole lot better weather. So, yeah, time will tell when they get it in. I will make sure I get with Jason in the next stack meeting, and we'll be able to give you guys hopefully a better update on do they have it actually scheduled? Do they have a contractor picked out? Things of that nature. Jason did tell that group of residents, when they do get a contractor, before they pull the trigger, we're going to have a little pre-construction meeting just to make sure that contractor's on board with our specifications. And so, hopefully we get a little better feeling that contractor will be able to actually produce that speed hump and make it within the parameters that we set.
Specifications?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or anything? Any more information that we need to have? Well, thank you very much. It was very informative.
Thank you.
And we
Thank
hope,
you on behalf of the neighborhood for your work up there.
And we'll have someone up there to talk to the neighborhood association. I'm ready to.
You guys are next Monday, the 27th is your meeting?
I'm not sure the exact date is. I think it's the third Monday.
This was fourth Monday, January only, and then third Monday for all the other months.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, we're gonna have somebody there.
Cool. Great.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much, Sean.
next is the Beaver Creek Road Concept Bike Interstructure Plan.
Infrastructure.
Is it possible to make that a little easier to say?
I need the clicker.
Just say stuff about roads and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll let this warm up.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Finally.
Y'all know Christina?
I don't see anything, but do you see anything on your screen?
We've got it on ours.
Okay.
It will pop on.
They'll
There
pop
we go.
up. There we go. Hello, my name is Christina Robertson Gardner. I'm a senior planner with Oregon City, and I'm working with our Planning Commission and community residents to implement the zoning for the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan. So I have about a 7-slide presentation this evening and kind of give you an update of where we are related to bike infrastructure, and we're looking for some general comments. So the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan is one of 3 concept plans that was adopted in 2008 and readopted in 2016, though really, in a sense, most of it was written in 2006. So we get talking about the infrastructure design. It really kind of time travel back to 2006. What you see up to the top of the right is the initial kind of outlay that looked at the different zoning areas, basically industrial to the north of Loader Road and a mix of commercial and residential to the south of Loader Road. It's generally the golf course and the airline strip, the airstrip that's east of the Oregon City High School and college. So the sample adopted street section for collector roads have a bike lane, and the way the adopted plan showed general right-of-way but did not identify specific widths of any subsection. So we kind of dusted off the adopted plan and looked at the right-of-way they identify and all the things they want in the right-of-way, and then realized that most likely they were identifying a 5-foot bike lane in 2006. These are for collectors. A local street wouldn't have a separated bike lane. It would be just a shared street like we have for our local streets. So this really discussion this evening is for collector and above conversations. So why are we here tonight? The Planning Commission, as we move forward with our package of recommended code amendments, identified a wish to see enhanced bike facilities in the concept plan more than what was adopted in 2006. So we've had some internal discussions with staff. We understand we do need a need for wider bike facilities. You know, the best practices today are different what the best practices were in 2006. But we also need a little bit of a balance of flexibility and certainty for the final design. We don't need to pick the final bike design tonight or through the spring. But the way land use works is when an application comes in, we can require dedication for streets. But we need to legally be able to acquire that right-of-way. So if we have the wrong right-of-way number in the plan, we can't get the full right-of-way we need. So that's kind of what we're looking right in the concept plan here is we want to make sure we have the right numbers in the adopted code that should be adopted this spring. The plan calls for, and I'll go back here, a kind of a green street median, which we still think is really important to the kind of vision of the plan that had both aesthetic green and functional green streets. Not necessarily the landscape median would be the functional part, most likely that would be on the outside, but kind of the aesthetic part of green streets. But with need for wider bike lanes, we may need some additional right-of-way. So going back, we understand we could just take the median out of the middle of the street and we would have the right-of-way we need to expand, but we think that by doing that doesn't necessarily meet the spirit of the planned streets as they were adopted. So we may need to require additional right-of-way is kind of where we're at this point. Protected bike lanes is one approach, and that is where you have basically vertical separation or at least separation between the bike lane and the moving car lane. And that can be done in many different ways. So here's some examples you see on the slide. It could be vertical elements like the popsicle sticks. It could be the cars itself of where they're parked. Sometimes if you switch and have the bike lane on the inside and the cars on the outside, that car itself creates that protected bike lane. You could have change of materials. So there's many different ways to create a protected bike lane. And internally, the Public Works Department hasn't quite, determined what the optimal design would be. But once again, we need to make an understanding what the maximum right-of-way dedication we would need. So there's some examples. If you have an 8-foot bike lane, which is kind of the way of doing the protected bike lane, you would have, see the bike lane, a 5-foot bike lane, and then a 3-foot buffer area with some type of separated element. The one to your left shows the parking on the outside. The version on the right is kind of more the traditional option, which is the parking on the inside, but you have to add an extra 1.5-foot door buffer. So really you end up with a 9.5-foot bike lane if you kind of keep it on the outside of the parking area. So once again, we're not necessarily recommending one or the other, just more this is what an enhanced bike facility looks like. So where are we today? We're coming to you this evening to kind of hear your comments, recommendations, fatal flaws to our approach. The Planning Commission will be looking at their full code amendment package, all the work we've been doing this fall and winter, at the February 10th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. They're going to kind of do their initial recommendation. We might have a meeting or two to kind of finish up their package. We will probably send a small survey out to about the 200 people on the Project eBlast and our social media channels about the issue we're talking about this evening. And then the City Commission is going to be doing a work session for the whole code amendment package, not just this element. Right now it's scheduled for the March City Commission work session. So we want to make sure this evening to hear from the Transportation Advisory Committee, any recommendations you have, and just know that we're kind of trying to find that balance of certainty so we can get the right-of-way acquired, but we still know we have some work to do as we move forward to the designing of the collector level roads.
I have a question.
Sure.
If you'd go back to the cross-section.
This one? Mm-hmm.
Yes. You're showing a 7.5-foot planting strip on the parking aisle, if you will. Is there any consideration given to reducing that number?
We could, but the 7.5 foot is a recommended planter strip for collectors, just citywide for collectors. So we've been kind of looking at if we're going to be building this to a kind of a city collector standard, that's where we're starting. So there's, if the question of do we reduce the medium or remove the medium or reduce the planter strip, then we're kind of leaving what the adopted plan was. So that's why we're reaching out to the community to see, if you keep within the right-of-way, you're losing elements that were adopted or part of our corridor, a right-of-way.
Are there any plans that have said whether there's safety considerations with one versus the other?
No, because in 2006, all that was said is we need bike lanes. And generally when you look, so I'll go back, when you look at
90 inches.
And this is one of the streets, but when you look at it, if you start adding up what those all are, you pretty soon realize they meant 5-foot bike lanes.
Okay.
Which has no protected area, either as just added buffer or where you place the bike.
So if we go back to the next one.
Sure.
The cross section. So on the one on the right, the cars would have to cross the bike lane.
Yeah, it's.
So is that a safe, has there been any tests in other areas where they say, okay, in this particular situation, we've had more incursions by cars hitting bikes versus the one on the left where you've given them clear separation?
So I'm not a transportation engineer, but I mean, for the most part, I know Ray can probably chime in. I mean, protected bike lanes, the one on the left is usually more recommended. And I can go back to these are all protected bike lanes examples where you have that vertical element in that space. So those are generally more recommended than the non-protective. But for communities that don't necessarily want to have the parking on the outside of the bike lane, that's the recommended width to still allow enough safe spacing.
And could you also extrapolate the fact that if it's less area required, the city's going to have to acquire less right of way, which then overall would reduce cost? Is that a safe assumption? Is the overall width, I'm not adding up all these numbers.
Right, and I'm just giving you a subsection of the street line. It was just, rather than to concentrate our conversation, yeah, and a wider street potentially be more expensive.
Okay.
If you're only able to have bike lanes on one side of the road, does that one bike lane, is it any wider?
Yeah, if it was a bi-directional bike lane, it would be probably even wider than the 9.5 feet.
Okay, and then were these considerations included in the Park Place and the South End concept plans?
That's a good question. I can take a look. Most likely, if a plan was adopted in the mid-2000s, it would have the 5-foot bike lanes. So we're now kind of reassessing. And that really was for this particular piece because we're in the Beaver Creek Road concept plan analysis, and the code amendments will just be for Beaver Creek Road concept plan area because that's how it was noticed. We wanted to make sure the project wasn't suddenly making citywide changes. So if something comes out of the Beaver Creek Road concept plan that wants to be more citywide, that can be a discussion after the whatever's decided for Beaver Creek.
Then could you go back to the diagram of the concept plan?
Sure.
And give us any idea of how many collector streets?
Well, right now, and that's a good question because we have a lot of collector streets in the Beaver Creek Road area. Generally, a lot of the roads you see a kind of back identified, kind of could see like a white and a gray. The way the concept plan was adopted, it showed the major roads, knowing that inside there'll be an additional grid with local streets. And so one thing we have been hearing from some potential developers in the areas, we think you might have too many collectors, but I think what we're saying is it really takes a transportation analysis to determine if your transportation numbers would meet the level of traffic to be. So if for some reason there were some areas where that level of traffic was much less, that it would transition to a local street.
And is your consideration for collector streets any different between an industrial area and a residential area?
The area north, we are looking at potentially there'll be wider traffic lanes and wider turn lanes, correct? But a lot of the kind of outside will most likely be the same, but the areas related to truck transportation and freight will be the appropriate lane widths and turn widths for an industrial area.
So I imagine Beaver Creek is probably itself an arterial?
Correct. So this is kind of not just Beaver Creek, this is everything inside, not Beaver Creek Road itself, because we went through a separate process with the City Commission on that.
Okay, are there bike lanes on that, on arterial?
Correct. Right now, there's 8-foot bike lanes right now with no on-street parking.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
I'm wondering if there's any evaluation for protected intersections as part of this, or is it only protected bike lanes?
Well, that's right. The only thing that related to the concept plan that we want to change. So the concept plan doesn't give that level of detail. So one thing that was identified is there may be some additional, citywide intersection discussion, but because it wasn't specifically detailed in the concept plan, we want to make sure that we're not continuing to implement something that doesn't meet today's best practices. But if we want to we're not quite ready to add new information to the adopted plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The reason why I'm asking that is because, especially if we look at a two-way bike lane, then you have to look at signals to make sure if somebody's going if it's a one-way street, then you gotta have the other way to have a signal for bikes. And also, pedestrian intersections usually are safer for bikes, especially with right hook situations and motorists who don't really realize there's cyclists around. So I'm a fan of protected intersections. Yeah. They are more expensive though, I'll say that much.
Is there any difference between residential and industrial areas as far as the number of bike lanes either planned or?
Well, all collectors right now have bike lanes in the plan.
Okay.
And so if the reason you would not, the two areas where you would not have bike lanes would be the 2 blocks of the main street, which is right down at the it's the red dot at the intersection of Glen Oak Road. And that is really a very small neighborhood main street where you imagine kind of 15-foot sidewalks and imagine kind of 2 blocks of downtown where there may be, you're kind of in a share situation or a local street.
Since there's planned to be transit in this area possibly with the shuttle or other transit options, are you looking at any transit facilities as part of this plan, like for people who are at a sidewalk trying to cross the bike lane and the parking to get over to transit?
Sure, we would rely on citywide standards for transit. So this, what we're looking for Beaver Creek is what's specific about Beaver Creek that's different from a city standard. And as we implement it, do we have the right number?
Okay.
To me, this, well, for one, the idea of, get right there, perfect. The idea for this was to get, we've got a concept plan that we're trying to adopt really zoning for. Out of that has triggered a lot of questions about transportation, which makes sense. Noticing in this case here, so there was a whole conversation about Beaver Creek Road. That's kind of a different conversation, but I think we got to a good place there. Now there's this question about, was the original plan really have enough forethought to think about bicycle infrastructure in today's standards, right? Since we're kind of taking a new look at this. And so we kind of felt like it didn't. And I think the concern is that, making adjustments, what can we absorb within the existing right-of-way ask, which was kind of approved back in 2008. We may be able to fit these extra things in there, but usually there's compromises associated with that, or we may have to ask for more. And so I think part of so we like to bring those conversations to the Transportation Advisory Committee anyway, but there's also kind of a time issue here that I just want to point out because I think that's important too, which is the issue came up at a Planning Commission meeting and a concern by the planning commissioners. And the planning department is trying to be responsive to that. So they put a lot of work into trying to really figure out whether or not you can squeeze these in there and then try and have some public involvement process that meets a reasonable threshold so that it seems like a small adjustment to me. And it also seems like one of those questions that, feels a little bit like a no-brainer in the sense that, well, who wouldn't want better biking facilities? But I think it's worthwhile for you to consider. And you're not asking necessarily for anything, but I mean, it would be good to hear if you had concerns. Same thing with, to me, there's something to be said for some of the pedestrian ways as well. Is there opportunities for more? We talked a little bit about the strip park through there and the fact that one of those collectors has parkland adjacent to it. So is there an opportunity to maybe blend the pedestrian way and bike facilities with, something that feels a little bit more like a parkway? But all those things, again, it's really about making sure we're getting the right-of-way right because we've got lots of latitude once we have that right-of-way ask. Unless we're, asking for, golden brick pavers, then the development committee is probably going to be okay with whatever, as long as we're not asking them for more right-of-way than what's in the plan, so.
Well, I will offer my 2 cents worth based upon what I've done here in past years. and what I know about how these plans were done then, and it was done mostly by outside consultants, and frankly, bike lanes were not very highly thought of at the time, and there was not the thought processes done in the industry that are available now. And you're dealing with something that's 13 years old as adopted and more like 15 years old as thought out. And given that, yes, a protected bike lane is way more desirable. I know I used to ride enough to know that I don't like riding next to the cars, no matter how fast they're going or slow. But it also strikes me that the 7.5-foot planting strip is rather generous for anybody to want to maintain as an adjacent property owner, and that you would probably have a better chance of keeping your right-of-way width and reducing the planter strip width to, say, 5 feet, which is still a generous planter strip, and using that extra 1.5 feet in the bike lane. Because, frankly, that 7.5 foot looks more like a weed patch to be than something that's going to be attractive.
You know, I tend to agree with you on that. I hadn't thought about it, but I used to have a home with a strip like that, and it was about 5 feet wide, I think. And maybe the standards say 7.5 feet, whoever standards that is, but who's to say we have to follow the standards exactly? I think Henry's got a good point, is 5 feet would give you plenty of planting strip and a little more for the rest of the bikes and the buffers and parking and all that. But I've got another question here. I've just noticed that in these two diagrams, there's a difference. One has a 1.5 foot buffer, and one has a 3 foot, looks like buffer, it's called traffic or something. Why the difference?
Right, when you're having the car as a buffer, and you're against the curb, that 3.5 buffer is also the door area. Oh. But when you are on the outside, you still need the door area. Basically, you need to be protected from the cars and the bikes when you're at the 9.5 foot. Okay. And then when the 8 foot, you're using the curb. You don't need the extra 1.5 feet because the door zone is also the protection zone.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, getting back to Henry's statement, let's maybe think that maybe we're smarter than the standards once in a while. You know, we don't always have to follow the standards.
So what I'm hearing, let me know if I'm putting words in your mouth, is you are supportive of, pursuing the, best practices bike facilities for 2020, but really looking at our existing right-of-way and see how that can be fit in.
I think that would be a fair statement.
Yeah,
I agree.
I have a question. So have you guys looked at the bike lanes that are grade separated, or, just taking the bike lanes out of that street section altogether and putting it next to a sidewalk, or?
Yeah, that's another option. I think it's more of that sometimes it's still giving you grade separated, or adding it to a pedestrian bikeway potentially is more right of way.
Well, no, if you took that five foot bike lane, and you have 3 foot, that's 9.5 feet there, and you have 5 foot sidewalk. If you create a 12-foot sidewalk and a bike lane combined, that's less than what you have on on that section. And I think bike being out there behind the planter is much safer than being next to a car either way.
Unless you happen to step in front of a moving bicycle.
Well, I know, but that doesn't, I mean, you see it, I mean, even there, I seen where they separated the
So you're saying create more of a boardwalk kind of area with a designated biking area?
There's, the state parks has several mixed-use pedestrian walking paths and bike paths, and they're roughly 10 feet wide, and frankly, they're almost dangerous to walk on because of the way bicyclists bike. You know, they'll use the whole width available to them, and and they're moving twice or three times faster than the people who are walking. So you still have a differential in speed, and Ray can always jump in and defend himself.
Well, I think the answer, though, is yes, we have been talking about the combined shared use paths, and we've looked at several scenarios for that. What we're really kind of saying is this provides for this section here doesn't show that, but this provides the space that if in further design and analysis and layout of the development plays out in a way that we decide, well, we really want more of a shared use kind of off the street section, we could fit that in here. And the area that where we've shown that doesn't show up here, but it shows up on the, what's the name of the street that we're calling for?
Yeah, so
what's the name of the street?
Thimble Creek.
Thimble Creek, yeah.
So kind of the parallel road to Beaver Creek Road, and I know you can't see my laser pointer, but this is really the parallel road. Some people called it Holly Lane Extension, which we find super confusing. So we would like to refer it more towards the term Thimble Creek Parkway or Thimble Creek Boulevard. And it would really be the Holly Lane Extension that gets you, that's south of Maple Lane, that runs parallel to Beaver Creek Road. And that area, a section of it, does have a very linear park, and we have a kind of a pearl and string approach, and the string of the pearls will be a shared use path with some landscaping. But that's only on the east side of the area related to the park, which is kind of, if you look at the green triangle, kind of everything south along the green triangle, you'll see this kind of green L. That kind of shows that the area for the pearl and string where we could have a shared use path option. And that would be where, yeah, exactly, you'd have a curb and the bike and the peds would be on that shared use path. But not every collector makes sense to have a shared use path. And the other thing that I didn't talk about, as part of the code amendments, the Planning Commission really wants to pursue 20 mile an hour on local streets in the Beaver Creek area as a test case. This is supposed to be a really pedestrian-friendly, bicycle-friendly area, and because no one lives here yet, it's a good test case for the 20 mile per hour area. And so with that, we have opportunities for really kind of low-volume streets and potentially even some family-friendly streets if we want. Within that, you don't see that next step of the local street grid, which will come and play out at a subdivision application.
I personally like Thimble Creek Terrace.
Okay.
I'll go on record and say I think it ought to be Holly Lane.
Well, I think you may lose on that one.
I want to go back to the planter strip question because I'm the one who's been advocating for the wire planter strips, and I feel our standard is 4.5 foot, right?
This is 7.5 in collector.
Is the standard?
City standard for
a 7-foot planter strip?
7.5 foot planter strip for collector streets.
Oh, I guess I was thinking of, so I must be thinking of residential then, at the 4.5 foot. I like it because those trees, so often we hear so much frustration about trees. It pushes that tree, the stalk of the tree away from the curb. And so, we're not ending up with these trees that are already in, the minute they're planted, they're already encroaching into in this case, the bike lane. They'd be further set from there, and then they just have that much more potential to thrive and become, in my mind, a better tree. And so that's where I like the wider planter strips myself.
So now, is there another planter strip running right down the middle of this street as well? Okay. And I assume that's going to be city maintained? And these outer ones will be businesses or residential in front? Okay. So what Bob was talking about, there's going to be a disconnect between how they look.
The other piece that we've been working on our stormwater master plan for so long, the street trees do play an important role in stormwater. They create shade, they create ability to reduce the temperature of the water that hits. So it's all kind of like a lot of things. Everything's integrated, and you push something and you get something else gets pushed this way. So, wider planter strips do play a good role in our stormwater management plan as well.
Is there still a recommended street tree list versus width of planter?
Yeah, we have it on our planning division page, and it's based on 3.5, 5, I think a 7 and a 10.
Because my suspicion is that you could probably address a portion of John's concern by specifying a smaller sized tree would have to be installed if the planter strip was restricted in.
Yeah, all trees either need to meet it beyond our planter list based on the width, or have an arborist provide documentation that because we can never keep up with every cultivar, and we plant trees in Oregon. So we basically say, here's our list, or, an arborist has to verify that it's the right tree.
Isn't it also feasible to have a tree that has deep roots instead of roots to go out?
It's not required, but we always do recommend root guards as a way to channel roots down and not horizontal.
I think maple trees are kind of forbidden.
I didn't know what kind they were. I just know that sometimes roots cause disruption on the sidewalk. So,
What do the bikers prefer for these two diagrams?
I prefer one on the left because the car is parked there, provides the sound barrier, and also if you don't have to feel the car next to you. But then for a motorist perspective, that they have to cross the bike lane, and if they're not used to looking for bikes, because unless you're in Portland, people look for bikers, but out here they might not be used to it, so they may get freaked out if they see a cyclist. They don't look before they cross, and could happen to hit each other. So that's my concern: is if they're not, where you're used to looking for cyclists, it could cause a accidental collision until they get used to the cultural change. But I definitely prefer to live on the left because it feels safer.
I sort of prefer it too, mostly because the farther away I am from a truck moving at 30 miles an hour, the less side blast I'm going to get when I'm on the bike. And also, if I can get a 5-foot bike lane with a 3-foot buffer next to the car, there's probably a minimum chance of collecting a car door accidentally while I'm on the bike. Because most car doors will end up inside that 3-foot buffer when they're open. Most. I think a Camaro will probably go another 4.5 feet, but.
I'd also like to add that storm grates, I don't know if you've looked at the design of that, but the reason why I asked that or mentioned that is because a lot of times they have wide spacing on the grates and my wheels get caught in it. So I don't know if there's a city standard for.
It is. We have bike friendly.
Thank you. My bike wheels appreciate it.
I think curb inlets are actually better, but that's beside the point.
I agree with you on that too, Henry.
What's better?
Curb inlets. Instead of having a grate in the street, you have an opening in the curb.
Oh, okay.
And the water comes around and drops into the curb.
Oh, yeah, I get what you're saying now, yeah.
And they're easier to clean, too.
All right, thank you.
So, kind of,
Quick question. So, I mean, we've had a lengthy discussion here. Is there any elements of this that we want to put in a motion so it goes forward so people can see?
Is there anything
What happened?
specifically planning was looking for us to add function to?
Well, we had this discussion earlier in the week, or last week, about what we're really asking you folks for, and really I think maybe generally would be that the TAC supports the idea of buffered bike lanes in the Beaver Creek concept area. Would that be sufficient for you, Christine, you think?
Yeah.
I mean,
even the recommendation that, the planning commission, they're balancing, lots of things related to the right of way, but,
We would be happy to make a recommendation if you want one.
I would just like to revise it a little bit because there's a difference between buffered bike lane and protected bike lanes. Buffered is usually just paint, and protected usually has either a concrete raised protection or car lane protection, and it's a lot safer to have actual protection versus just paint. So if I'd like to, revise that to say protected bike lane, not just buffered.
you can say like when protected bike lane preferred if possible.
I'm okay with that. The concern that I have is there's several different street sections we've talked about internally, including the residential street, which would be more of a Sharrow kind of a typical residential street. So I just want to be careful when if you make a motion.
Do we want to make it specific to collector?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And before we make a motion, I would like to point out too, if you have a protection that is a vertical solid protection between your street section and the bike lane, you're going to have a maintenance problem because you're not going to be able to sweeper through.
Do you have a sweeper for the bike lanes?
90 inches. 90 inches is how narrow our street sweeper can go.
Yes.
And that's just the dimension of
And
the
that's
sweeper.
7 feet. That's not even, that's over 7 feet, 7.5 feet.
7.5 feet.
Yeah, and yeah.
So they won't fit a bike lane then?
No.
Okay.
So obviously buy specialized equipment.
Can we borrow some Portland's? Portland's doing it, I think.
So maybe we struggle with that too. For one, we're still kind of conceptually going through this. It's just trying to stay on track with a planning commission meeting for approval and moving that forward. I think we've still got some, but I just, so to me, it sounds like what we are hearing from you in the discussion is support for better bike infrastructure that would include buffered and protected bike lanes. And I don't think we need a motion for that.
And certainly, and the other part of it was, I would think, was if possible, staying within the right of way.
It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, there may be times where we just can't. We need to add the extra 2 feet, but there may be times that we're balancing and we can.
Yeah, I would hate to tie it down to the point where there was, but in general, it looks like you should be able to provide it and stay within the right of way.
Right. And then, the planning commission will give us the direction, and then just so you know, the product will be probably a one-page exhibit A that'll be added to the plan that further refines where there's, not quite perfect correlation to the plan and today's best practices and standards.
Out of curiosity, from the survey aspect, I don't know if you've thought about how you're going to be dispersing, the language you're going to be using in that, because the reason why I asked is because Portland cyclists and people usually are used to this kind of infrastructure, but I hear it's new to them and they probably don't think like I do with the issues or pros and cons. So are you just going to say this is a cross section which we like best, or are you going to explain details about it?
Yeah, I don't know yet.
Okay.
Something I'll be working on this week. I think at a minimum we have to let the community know that this is happening because it's just the basic public outreach requirements. We need to bring everyone into the table that's interested in this conversation. It probably might be qualitative comment. We're not going to be asking people to pick your favorite A or B because that's not where we are in this process yet. We're still, balancing. So it may just be more, here's what we're thinking, are we on the right track, is there anything you want to share? It may be that level of survey, because we don't want to be in a place where we're preliminary picking a design that we're not ready yet, because we don't have the details.
So I think that's the way that at least the roundabout and the 3-lane versus 5-lane cross-section for Beaver Creek Road was done, was a lot more detail on what the pros and cons were. And that's the reason why I'm trying to get in the forefront of this case. I just want to make sure it's worded in a way that when the survey results come out, that they know what they're voting on, basically.
Yeah, that's a good to bring in conversations about maintenance and protection.
Yeah,
I like
exactly. Cool, thank you.
Anything else?
that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate
very
your
informative.
time.
Next is the Public Works report, I believe.
So I couldn't remember, I don't recall out of our Malala presentations what we shared with you last, but I wanted to make sure we were covering some public testimony that came up. And so I may, if I've repeated this, I want to talk a little bit about the project as a whole, just to remind you all. I want to talk a little bit about what's coming in terms of construction schedule. But also, if you remember, in 2019, we had some folks that were concerned about the dual lefts off of Malala Avenue onto Beaver Creek. And there was a concern about some pedestrian conflicts with some right turns at that same intersection. And I couldn't tell if we brought this back, so.
I don't remember it.
We discussed it, but it was never brought back.
Okay, so good. Yeah, we'll cover that tonight. I'm still going to try and cover it pretty quickly. So, thank you for your time. So we have heard a few key community concerns. Definitely, public outreach has been a challenge on this. We've done a lot of public outreach on this, but we haven't necessarily heard directly from the tenants, which you would think you would hear a lot from the tenants because we're going to have some pretty major impacts. I think what we have done, we've since heard from them that they're really excited about the project and they're looking forward to it. They just want us to do it. So we talked about this southbound right turn lane at Beaver Creek Road. That showed up kind of late in the design. It wasn't our original intent to take move that part of the project forward at all. But we've since added that. There's been a lot of discussion about pedestrian crossings and concerns about the traffic at the post office and what we might be able to do with that, and a couple other things that I'll cover. So with regard to the webpage, by the way, Dana Webb, who's our city engineer, she presented this to you last time. She's been the project manager. We've since hired a guy named Brian Van Smorenberg, who's a senior project engineer who's trying to transition from design phase into the construction phase. So he's taking over for Dana. But Dana and our administrative staff have done a really good job creating this public involvement webpage. So if there's ever a question about it, it's just looking at this, it's pretty well updated. It's got a lot of information about various meetings that we've been to. And maybe if I'd looked at this, I could have told you whether or not we'd already talked about this, but it looks like CAC was done back in October of 2015. So that kind of information is available online, as well as the open houses. And then any support documents that you might be interested in or that the community might be interested in, you can always refer them to that. But we've got lots of things. There's been some follow-up questions. In fact, the questions that came up at our, I know they were in the September meeting was where there was a Mike Ard from Ard Engineering came, William Gifford came, and they spoke. That was in September. And so as subsequent to that, there has been some traffic analysis and issue paper that followed up with that that's online as well. So should be able to get everything that you need to from those documents. So really, this southbound right turn lane at Beaver Creek Road, we heard the concern for this movement right here in that with the project being a success, lots more pedestrian traffic, lots more calls for pedestrians at that signal. What we're proposing is converting one of the through lanes, what's really the middle lane to a left turn lane, which means that outside lane, or the lane closest to the bank, they're highlighted in red, is the through lane and the right turn lane, right? And so we asked Kittleson and Associates to do a fair amount of analysis of that to see, well, what happens with twice as much pedestrian traffic as we have today? What would that do? And the result was, yes, there's potential for some delay, but not so much delay that it warrants a turn lane there. So this project does not include a turn lane. What we have acknowledged that there's likely, with the build out of the Red Soils campus for the county, there's going to be more times that we should look at this intersection, and it may at someday in the future warrant a right turn lane there, but we're not seeing that in today's analysis. Here's the configuration that we're proposing, which is the dual left turn lanes from Malala Avenue southbound to Beaver Creek Road southeast bound. And so we definitely are still advocating for that, mostly because we think we need it, one, during construction, and two, after construction. We have seen enough evidence that there's a lot of through traffic, and we're seeing a lot of the left turns that are in the single lane left turn that back up. And they back up even with the permissive flashing yellow signal that you get at that intersection. Now with this configuration, you won't get that flashing signal, which is makes it a little less efficient for moving traffic, but we've had a lot of accidents in that intersection too. And we think that it's just busy enough that, well, for one, it doesn't work very well with the two lane. In fact, I don't even think they allow it with the dual lefts, but that element of that intersection would go away. So no more flashing yellow for that movement.
John, I still have a bit of a concern on that right-hand lane being both the right turn lane and the through lane. And with pedestrian coming across parallel with Beaver Creek Road, parallel with Malala, takes quite a bit of time for a pedestrian to come across from, say, that assisted living facility over to the bank. Mm-hmm. And so you've got people lined up wanting to turn right and also wanting to go through all in one lane. By the time the pedestrians get across there, it doesn't seem to me like it would leave much time to get all those cars through there, because whenever I'm on that intersection, it seems like there's a lot of cars that are wanting to turn right at that intersection, in addition to the ones going through. So I don't know, I've just got to express my concern of that particular issue. It might be a backup there. But you're listening to the experts, so
yeah.
Who am I to say?
Yeah, well, I think it's something our analysis, and I say ours, the experts, Kittleson Associates analysis, there is some delay there, but it's not significant enough to warrant the addition of a right turn lane.
Would it be backing up enough to start blocking the exit out there by the bank and by the McDonald's?
Well, that's why Mike Ard was here. I mean, he was representing the shopping center property owner as well. And I think that there's potential for that. Now, there's a lot of access points to that property.
Yes, there is.
So, I don't, from our perspective, it's not, a fatal concern, but there may be times when, it backs up past that driveway.
I'm thinking about the possibility of sometime in the future being able to move some of those movements over to the signalized intersection out of the Danielson's property there, so that some of these can be closed off or otherwise utilized, that perhaps as part of what we're doing here, it may be advisable to start having some sort of redesign back in their stuff so that there's less demand to go out through there. I don't think there's a lot now.
Coming out of those would be no right turn.
Yeah, no lefts or whatever, yeah.
Well, you know, I think what we're saying is, let's continue to keep an eye on it. We're not proposing to change driveways in and out of that shopping center property.
I don't think so.
I do think that they have an abundant amount of access along that frontage in particular. You know, as we see further development of the site across the street, you know, where will pedestrian traffic really be headed? Will it all be headed on that one side? Who knows? There's a lot of questions about that. And yes, we want pedestrian traffic to be, would like to see more pedestrian traffic. When will that develop? When will that generate? We don't know. But we're making very clear in this project scope that yes, we're going to incorporate the dual lefts. They can be done with striping and some movement of signal heads only. Adding a right turn lane would require that there's a signal pole on that corner as well. It would have to move, so it'd be pretty much a redo of the signalization in Beaver Creek Road and Malala Avenue. So we're trying to avoid that. So we're picking some pretty low-hanging fruit in this case, and with the understanding that we need to keep an eye on that.
And you'd probably have to get some right-of-way where it looks like there might not be enough, be a lot to get.
It's another right-of-way file, which we're trying to minimize those. Remember, this was about an $8 million project. We're seeing that number change, not just because of, this is small right here, but we've got some other project things that are, anyway, this is kind of a picture that we have a camera now on Power Tilt, a zone camera, a zoom that can
Pan, tilt, zoom.
Pan, tilt, zoom. Thank you. That is mounted on that signal head there, so we can look in either direction now and zoom quite a ways. But this is just a picture that was taken about 3:30 p.m. So it's our PM peak that really kind of stacks up.
There I are.
So we're hoping that through lane isn't too big of a problem, but you know, in this case here, a lot of those cars are using the middle through lane right now, and in the future they'll have to make that left turn.
So you don't, I mean, I could see I guess maybe not, you have dual lanes. It seems like more people want to go left than wanting to go through. In the background where you circled with it.
Yeah, it looks like they're all, where that red is, they're all backed up waiting to queue into this lane versus if you moved all these behind the white minivan, there's not that many trying to go through.
I think the hard part is we tend to design these things for peak hour, right? And there's all those other hours of the day. I still think that the through traffic is going to be reduced greatly. And after, enduring probably a year's worth of construction on this project, I think a lot of people will find that route to be better. Keep in mind, I think we've shared with you that we got the $1 million ARTS grant from the state for signal upgrades along Beaver Creek Road from really Maple Lane all the way to Warner Milne, sorry. So we're going to see signal interconnects, new controllers, safer signal heads, that there's just a lot of improvements along that corridor as well. So by the time we're done with Malala, we'll also, I think the timing is such that we see improvements on Beaver Creek Road as well. Signal improvements on Beaver Creek Road, let me clarify. So real quick, not much change here. We're still planning on a pedestrian crossing. This is right in front of Black Rock and the apartments. So again, seeing lots of jaywalking at that location anyway. So this should be an improvement, but it will prohibit left turns in and out of the driveway there. But there's lots of access points to this facility as well. So we think that, it'll be a change for people like myself who use that driveway all the time. And I'm sure many of you do, but just finding a different way to get into that parking lot. There's lots of options. Then the other one that has been somewhat controversial, and we've tried to make some adjustments, is the crossing near the post office and near the fire station. We've tried to look at every option available. Neighborhood wanted it back down near Garden Meadow. Couldn't put it there. We're pretty concerned about the fire district, some of their access points. Talking to the post office, they preferred it be between the two driveways as opposed to kind of closer to the fire district. So I think we've got a good compromise here. So that's where that's at.
I got a thought about that one. Having used the drop box a lot and making that right turn coming out of from the drop boxes, I am finding myself thinking that there's quite a few people, probably myself included, who will be looking left for a hole in the traffic and then turning right into the possibility of getting into a pedestrian by the time I've turned my head around to look ahead. And one of the things that comes to mind is that there's been a number of pedestrian type accidents of that nature on one-way streets where you are looking one way and turning the other, and there's a pedestrian in front of you that you didn't see because you weren't looking. And I'm thinking possibility exists that we're setting up the same situation here.
Well, the only thing, right turns, if people aren't looking, there's potential for always a problem there. But the one thing that I would say, by the way, the flashing beacon symbols, in this graphic, they didn't actually move them into the right location. So they're still sitting where the old locations were. So that pedestrian beacon would be between the driveway and the pedestrian crossing there. So I'm going to point with this pointer. So it would be right in this area.
Okay.
So, and the other thing that's great about those rapid flashing beacons is they have the flashing beacons on the front of them. There's usually a beacon on the side, a strobe on the side of them as well, which would be pretty obvious for somebody in that driveway. So maybe that's a good thought, Henry, is how do you, for both of those, how do you put those flashing beacons in a place that's close enough to alert both the driver coming north or south on Molalla, but also focused on the driver that's in the driveway. So yep. I think maybe that's something that's a good thought.
Well, the other driveway too, the same thing would apply if somebody's coming out of the other driveway attempting to turn left onto Molalla. You could face the same situation where you're looking off to your right for traffic coming to you. You're not looking left where the crosswalk would be.
You mean the
same situation? You mean taking a right out of Biscuits or left out of the main post office?
Are you talking the Biscuits driveway?
No, out of the post office driveway. And the other driveway.
Well, you should be seeing those pedestrian rapid flashing beacons if you're coming out of that driveway.
Yeah, so they would be. You'd have plenty of sight from both sides. Yeah.
With this one, the first thing your first lane you got to cross is the one coming from your left.
Yeah.
So everybody looking.
So you're all looking at this stuff already. Then you get out to here.
I'm here. If you're looking to your right over here to turn left.
Yeah, but
You better be looking left because you're gonna be crossing that through lane, so you've gotta be looking both directions if you're
And when
making
you're
a
in the
left.
median, you're gonna be watching your right-hand mirror, so you're kind of looking forward.
Well, I'm gonna get a Hummer and everybody just better look at it.
That sounds like an excellent idea, actually.
I'm just writing a note because, I wanna make sure I don't forget that.
Now we've got him all discombobulated.
I know.
No, I think that's a good suggestion, so, all right. Here's another one, that's down near the point, OC Point.
I think you got the same problem there, too.
I think not as significant.
Maybe I'm looking at it
Because
wrong.
of the median, so the driveway on the side that's on the downside of the slide is there's a median there, so they can't turn left.
Exactly. And across the street, coming out of the little shopping mall there, I can't remember where that driveway is.
So that's quite a distance from
Yeah,
there.
there's
So I
quite a
don't
bit
think
of
we have
ways,
that
yeah.
problem there. Trying to remember. Yeah, we've made quite a bit of adjustment there, and we've working with SureGuard as well. That's just where we've spotted a cross street banner, so that there is a grant project that Dana applied for and got for a cross street banner. So Vance's crew would be able to safely install a banner from one side of the street and have it pulled across the other. So we're working with the manufacturer on that. And but anyway, that was a concern.
Is it something that you just roll? Like,
ours is a little more, our design concept and what we've used in the past is a little better in that it's got a cable system where you can move that cable from either side of the street. You can move it from the pole location.
oh, okay.
Connect onto the banner and somebody can feed it across and you can pull it across and don't have to be out in traffic, stopping traffic.
Think like a boat crank with the cable, sending it across.
I think we shared with you this, the feedback we got. I think we had sheet metal, like what we've seen in some of our other places, and people like the basalt seawall option better, as did the property owner that kind of fronts this.
I wanted, before we move on from this one, I just wanted to give kudos to the cyclist that you guys chose. I don't know who chose it, but having a female with normal clothes on, book bag, and standard bike, not drop down to, that's city biking looking, so I appreciate the look of that biker.
Oh, wow. I'll have to tell the artist that.
And the reflectors on the spokes.
Yeah, so I like this cyclist. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's not usually done that way.
I can't tell if the dog is lifting its leg on anything. All right, so real life is what you're saying there. We got some real life stuff to do. All right, good. So, construction is coming. I know we've been talking about this project for a long time. It feels like a long time getting here, and we've had a lot of good community support. I did want to re-acknowledge William. He mentioned this at the last one, but he did have a lot to do with the fact that the city got the grant. At that time, we were trying to get public feedback. Sometimes it's hard to get public feedback. I think the TAC supported this as well, but William showed up. I know, I can't remember if any of the TAC members showed up, but we were competing for that funding with several other cities and county agencies. And so he mentioned that a little bit in his last comment that we heard from him. And I just wanted to kind of reemphasize that kind of community support has been really good around this project. So appreciate that. But traffic impacts, obviously, once we get under construction, we're going to take that, which is really pretty much a 3-lane section, and it's going to turn to a 2-lane section, and we're going to push it on one side or the other, depending on where we're working. So there won't be a turn lane. Bikes, unfortunately, we're going to suggest that you use Beaver Creek Road or Myers, which is off the beaten path a ways. At Claremont and Gaffney, and really, there's a couple other side streets there too, that are already stop controlled, but right now Claremont and Gaffney are signalized, and once we get into those, to the degree we can no longer use those signals, we're going to convert those to a stop controlled, so it'll be stop sign. That will be different and might be a little frustrating. We'll just have to monitor that and see how that kind of works out to get people off those side streets. But
You're speaking about both Malawa and the cross street being stop signs.
Yep.
And due to the new state law, cyclists can treat that as yield sign then. Okay.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it depends if there's no traffic around.
Yeah.
I just want to make that
I would
comment.
stop if I were them.
I'll probably stop.
Pedestrians have right of way too, right? But we like to tell
They do.
them to
Pedestrians have priority
look
over
before
cyclists.
they step out,
Yeah.
right? So anyway, there's going to be some significant traffic impacts. We expect night work. Obviously, we've got one lane through, but there'll be times when trucks will be pulling out and need, to actually even slow that one lane traffic to allow for construction activity. So keep that in mind. We'll probably close Claremont while we're working on Claremont and push everybody to Gaffney and vice versa when we're in those intersections. So it's going to be tough. I encourage you to use Beaver Creek Road. But we also know that there's a lot of businesses that you can't get to from Beaver Creek Road that are on Malala Avenue. So if you want to go to Burgerville for, shakes and what kind of fries do they have? They got all kinds of fries over there. Then please go visit Burgerville or any other business that's along the corridor.
So when is groundbreaking?
Well, we haven't bid the project yet, so we don't know, but we're shooting for soon. How's that? There is some tree removals that we expect even yet this month. We had requested bids for tree removals to get that work started first, and we ended up working out a deal with PGE. So PGE is going to remove the trees, our trees, and their own trees. PGE has several trees, so quite a few trees. I think there are close to 40 trees that are going to have to come out of various sizes along the entire corridor. But
PGE has trees in their easements.
PGE is we've asked PGE to move outside the right-of-way into the public PUE, which is outside the sidewalk. So right now, if you've walked that corridor, a lot of the power poles are right in the middle of the sidewalk. So moving them out onto private property, and in doing that, there's not only PGE lines there's all the comms. Mm-hmm. And so all the communication lines, which hang much lower, are in conflict with a lot of the trees. Some of them large, so expect that. Transportation projects are hard on trees. We learned that with Myers Road. I don't know if you've been through Willamette Drive lately. Has anybody driven down through West Lynn? And
Yeah, I was there the day before they did it, and then I came back a couple days later, and I was like, where did all the trees go?
Yeah.
And all that so they can change the parking.
Well,
they're taking out that
more than that.
strip,
They're doing a lot with. They're doing a cycle track, and they're doing better pedestrian access and on-street parking. So it's not just so they can reconfigure the parking. They're doing a lot of things. I've heard street trees with electric for lighting, and some pretty neat stuff. So that'll be a good project to watch.
Artificial Doug fir.
I think that used to be a...
So out to bid in March. We hope to start construction in late spring, early summer of 2020. So.
And it's going to be done in a year or?
So we know, they're going to be able to do a lot of the work throughout the winter, but it kind of depends on the winter. And a lot of the work that comes last on that project are the things like coring out the street. I think I mentioned before, it's not just new sidewalks and new signals and those kind of things. The street section of Malala Avenue is, it's an old state highway, and it's held up pretty well for as long as it's been there. But this project will rebuild that, and by rebuild that, I think it's about a 24-inch road section that includes I don't remember the numbers, but I want to say like 9 inches of asphalt over, I don't know, 16 inches of rock. So it's a pretty big section. And so, yeah, you know, how much of that work happens in weather like this is dependent. And then paving is most likely going to have to be maybe late spring, early summer. So,
Well, I'll tell you though, that's really outstanding forethought. You know, as far as I'm concerned, that's really great.
you mean the,
On the section?
That they're going that deep to rebuild Molalla. I mean, that's
yeah.
really thinking far ahead rather than just little thin patchwork stuff. That's great.
Yeah, it's what we've done on all the sections of Molalla Avenue that have been rebuilt, Beaver Creek Road to similar section. It's just with bus traffic and truck traffic, the rigs are getting bigger and bigger. So yeah, it's mostly due to truck loading that drives those kinds of road sections, but it's very expensive. I guess that's the other little message is, you know, we added, you know, all that work kind of outside the project area for the dual lefts. That's not very expensive because it's mostly striping, but the signal changes that we're doing there, and then the new signal at Fur, that wasn't intended in the project, and then yeah, just the cost of construction have changed significantly. So we're a couple million off, so we're working on filling that gap as well. So one thing I will say is we have been able to justify a lot of the pavement maintenance dollars for this project because of all that roadway construction that we're doing. Next year, we're not planning to do much, if any at all, reconstruction work. We're still going to do things like slurry seals, but we won't be doing a lot of milling and paving, except for what Vance's crew can do with the milling and paving. So got a little, that's how we're going to cover the gap. Okay, if you don't have any questions, I'll move on to the next topic. And I think, let's see, what's the agenda here? 99E bike and pedestrian improvements. I don't have a lot other than we got a nice grant from Metro on, or we got notice. So far we haven't seen the grant, but we've got notice that we're going to get the grant for $673,000 to look at. This is the wrong slide, but that's for the next presentation. Right now I'm talking about the 99E bike and pedestrian improvement projects. Project, which is in your binder. There's some project information sheets, but it's basically looking at feasibility of increased pedestrian. That's distracting me. I'm looking at that and talking about something else. Thank you. Yeah, that's way better. So anyway, trying to get pedestrian traffic from really 10th and Main over to the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. So we were talking about this on 99E further out on the other side of the tunnel, how narrow that is, but it's also pretty narrow along that stretch of 99E as well. The reason why it's narrow is because most of it's on a bridge. So it's most of that's elevated, and it's an ODOT bridge. And once it's no longer a bridge, then we've got that kind of that parking area where the fishermen always used to hang out along the waterfront there. And then you get a little further and you've got really the full bridge abutment there, which is another constraint. And then once you get beyond that, then it's a nice wide section because of that parking area there. But trying to figure out how to facilitate bikes and pedestrians to be able to maneuver that section of 99E is what this study funding is for. So it's a grant really to just look at project development for that, try to figure out ways to either cantilever or build a new bridge or look at something grade separated that gets a lot closer to the river. There's probably going to be lots of options. So that is what that grant is for. And other than that, I'm going to read her email because I think it's easier than trying to
John?
express.
am I remembering correctly, or aren't those viaducts on the state's list of degraded bridges that need some attention?
That's true, but it's also not, it's not a facility that ODOT foresees any time in their,
Immediate or far future?
yeah.
Is the cantilevered
50
section?
years from now, yeah.
Is the cantilevered section that parking under the bridge, or does it actually also include the roadway? Is that like by
Actually,
Linneman's?
the area under the bridge isn't cantilevered.
Okay.
It's sitting on bedrock, and you can see, as you look off the edge there.
But
you
just
can
south of it is.
north, just north of that. So between really the McMinimums
And the bridge.
McMinimums and I think it's, well, you can, on 8th Street, there's a little trail where you can actually walk under it, but it's not much further from 8th Street, and it becomes solid ground again.
Okay.
Behind the courthouse, it's a full bridge.
Yeah.
So this is a study.
Let me read it just because there's good information in the packet for you, but for the listening audience, I'll read this for you. So on January 16th, 2020, Metro Council awarded Oregon City a $673,000 grant to assist the city in project development of the Willamette Falls Shared Use Path and Oregon 99E Corridor Enhancement Project. The project is located on 99E, or more commonly referred to as McLaughlin Boulevard, which is an Oregon Department of Transportation facility. The corridor is identified as a regional bikeway and pedestrian parkway, and a frequent transit service run parallel to the corridor. The remaining phase of the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan has been the most complicated to complete. It is interwoven with the Oregon 99E viaduct, that's the bridge I was talking about, and a lack of proper lighting, crumbling sidewalks, not wide enough to provide barrier from adjacent fast-moving traffic, and dilapidated railings makes transit users and pedestrians feel unsafe. The project has two main goals that address barriers to investing and revitalizing properties that front McLaughlin Boulevard in Oregon City. First one is close the gap and provide safe pedestrian and bicycle access. Provide a complete street design for McLaughlin Boulevard from 10th Street to 99E Tunnel. In 2005, the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan, which completed the planning phase and alternatives identification and evaluation, was adopted. Since then, we've completed phase 1 and phase 2 of the key corridor. Plan assumed the viaduct would be replaced in the near future, allowing the identified crossing sections to be implemented. However, the viaducts are not expected to be replaced with a widened structure that would support the widened sidewalk. So we need to update the options with this section of the corridor to provide needed bicycle and pedestrian access. This grant funding will allow the city to complete the alternatives identification and evaluation to determine how we address this critical gap in our active transportation network. Once preferred alternative is identified, we would continue forward with preliminary design to 30%. The city looks forward to getting this important work underway in the coming years. The grant funding is for 2022 through 2024, so we have a better idea on timing and project details. We'll reach out with additional information. So if you're not familiar with phase 1 and phase 2, phase 1 was the area with the deck where really between 10th and, say, Sportcraft, that whole area, that was phase 1. Phase 2 was the section that's really around Dunes Drive and between Clackamas Bridge and McDonald's, that area. So that's good news. Any questions that we
I
can
have
pass
one.
along to Dana?
I'm curious how the downtown businesses have thought of this, because if pedestrian and bike traffic move over to the 99E instead of downtown, that would impact their businesses possibly. So I'm curious what their thoughts are if they happen to lose bike ped traffic from downtown and move over to 99E, if it becomes more attractive.
Yes and no. I don't know how much outreach we've done for DOCA, which is the Downtown Oregon City Business Association. That's not DOCA. But there's been a lot of regional discussion about this gap and how bicyclists, for instance, can get really through Oregon City to Canby. So this is one element to that, along with the Willamette Falls waterfront path. And those of you that know much about that, it also extends through Kenema along the railroad grade there. So the idea would be to stitch that together a little bit more for bicyclists and pedestrians. So there is there's still that active need for folks to get into Main Street. Main Street isn't that friendly either for bicyclists. It's friendly for those that are competitive maybe and more willing to endure traffic, but families aren't using it. So and there's really no option to make that Main Street corridor any more family friendly than it already is.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about the tunnel? I mean, that becomes obstacle, but you're saying the traffic would be routed through the...
Yeah, the long-range plan is to take this waterfront path that, imagine, so another piece of information that I wasn't planning to share, but Gladstone got included. So there's a pretty big funding measure that Metro is considering right now, which is called the T2020 measure, which will be on the ballot in November. But in that, they're listing a lot of projects just so that they can touch on all the communities with good projects and hopefully get their votes. And one of the projects is to get the Portland Avenue Bridge across from Gladstone to Oregon City, which would, bring that whole bike path system that goes really all the way into Sellwood, straight to the Cove area, through the Cove area, take it around through Clackamas Park, on through John Storm, over the McLaughlin Phase 1 projects, and then, in theory, this Phase 3 project, and that puts you onto the Blue Heron site, where there would be a waterfront trail along there, and the long-range plan is to have some conversion of some of the railroad grade along the waterfront between the falls and Kenema, convert that to bike pedestrian friendly as well. So you'd miss the tunnel altogether. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of projects, a lot of challenges. So just piece by piece by piece, it's kind of.
So is this Phase 3 trying to get from then Phase 1? Phase 2 goes north. So Phase 1 south to the Willamette Falls Blue Heron project.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to mention the double-track high-speed rail that's supposed to go through that same corridor.
Okay, so sorry. Kim, can you back on? Now I can be distracted with. So I don't quite remember how this topic came up. Maybe one of you can remember how this topic came up. But the idea of a three-way stop at Gaffney Lane in Berta.
Our member that isn't here brought it up at one of our previous meetings.
Vance Tong.
Oh, Vance brought it up. Mm-hmm. Okay. We knew the topic had come up. I couldn't remember how it came up. So anyway, I just want to give you a little update. We've talked about this internally. We haven't really made a full decision, but I felt like it had been out there for a while. So I was just going to mention a couple things. And Kim, can you hand these out? So one thing I just thought we'd do is take an opportunity to remind you, we have on our website this, and we put it at various counters around, but this stop sign brochure, which kind of provides a little bit of information about warrants for stop signs, because we get requests for stop signs pretty regularly. And so this document has been around for a long time. Hopefully our numbers are still good on it, but
do you also get,
we've got Warner Milne on our address here, so we probably do need to update that. But
do you also get a request for yield signs or just stop signs?
Stop signs.
Okay.
Stop signs. And in this case, that was the request, was to, right now, Gaffney Lane is really only got one stop, and if that's pretty much if you're headed westbound on Gaffney Lane. And so we had Jason Thornburg look at this, and Dana looked at it. Jason was looking at it more from, I think, just how do you post the signs, and what's the configuration there? Would he not support it, or would he support it? And then Dana looked at it more from the warrant perspective, and her position was doesn't meet warrants, shouldn't do it, and that's one way we could go with this. I think Vance brought the idea of a temporary change associated with the Malala Avenue project, because like I said, there's going to be times when we're going to close Claremont, we're going to push all that traffic over to Gaffney Lane, and it is a little bit of a confusing intersection. It's odd in the alignment. There's curbs and sidewalks on one side, but not on the other. And so I just thought we'd talk through it a little bit. This is approaching it from Berta. So I don't know that these are necessarily in great order, but this is the Berta leg. And right now you can go through there without any stopping. You can go through and make a left without any stopping. The only stopping vehicle is the vehicle that's in the Gaffney Lane leg that's kind of on the left there. So that's a little closer look. There is one little complication with that, in that the driveway that's over here on the right-hand side of your screen is right kind of where we put a stop bar and a stop sign. So trying to figure that out was Jason's concern, I think, was just acknowledging that. This is the other side of Gaffney Lane, and obviously the roadway does a little kind of a twist there. So if you're going through it, you still kind of have to make a little bit of a veer to stay away from the oncoming traffic. So the stop bar there would look a little odd as well, and just trying to make sure, the stop sign is visible is a concern. The other thing we could do, rather than put stop signs, is just right now we don't have the, cross traffic does not stop sign at Ryder. I can't remember if that's what it says or not, but
just read my
to that
mind.
effect. What's that?
You just read my mind.
Yeah. So we could do that as an option, and not do the stop signs on the side streets. I'm having a little trouble deciding, but I do think the fact that we're going to be moving some traffic that doesn't normally use that to that intersection might make sense on a temporary basis. See how it goes.
I have a thought, using this a lot. That's my alternative to get to Fred Meyer, because I don't like going up Malala. My thought would be to make Berta a yield and put a bump out where, roughly where the garbage cans are, and then put your signage in that bump out, maybe 3 feet or something, just enough to get it past the sidewalk area, but out where you can see it.
So, like right here?
Yeah, right, a little bump out right there with the signs in it, and make it a yield, make that leg a yield.
We don't have a lot of yield-controlled intersections.
I know.
What would that?
Well, what seems to be happening is...
Why would you yield if, that guy had, that traffic has a stop, you have, in this scenario, you have a right of way, right?
Okay.
You could just go do whatever.
You have a conflict because, from my experience, the majority of the people currently using Berta are also making a left onto Gaffney. And the people coming around the corner from Gaffney, from way back by the school, this little short section of Gaffney is not enough to be able to allow the driver approaching you to both anticipate your turn and set up for the corner without stopping.
So do we have traffic incursions,
would be
accidents and
like
such
a-
that has spurred this, or what's the concern?
So,
Left turn yield to oncoming traffic or something?
Well, yeah, some of that ilk, because almost all of the traffic here, to my knowledge, which is limited, is heading toward Fred Meyer, coming up Berta and going toward Fred Meyer. Very little of it seems to be going up Gaffney, because that takes you back to where you were.
yeah, I'd just be a little concerned about using the yield with a stop sign.
Yep, the stop sign's over yonder.
But I mean, in the same intersection.
Yeah, but the yield is for the oncoming traffic coming towards you.
So it would
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
say yield to oncoming traffic,
Because,
right?
yeah, because this guy's coming towards you is doing about 25 mile an hour plus or minus. You're doing about 5 as you make that corner.
I mean, to me, this, if the alignment weren't screwy here, it'd be no different than making, yeah, it'd be no different than
Just
making
because
a
the
left
name
turn. You have to
changes.
yield.
Right.
Yeah.
So it seems a little.
Would it help just to add, like, take that little jog out and literally stripe it like it continued on Berta? Like, stripe it like this is the picture we're looking at. If you
That Gaffney
stripe
and
it
Berta
so it's
was
like one street, because then it's like any other intersection. I think part of the problem you've got going on here is you've got it striped with that little turn to the right, saying, hey, this road goes really to the right, as opposed to if this was just one straight street striped all the way down the middle, you'd treat it like any other right turn.
Yeah.
So I was using this for I was taking my kids to soccer games there at Gaffney and practice, and I would come off Malala. I never understood why it felt like that Malala is the street that should just continue to go. There shouldn't even be a stop there.
You mean Gaffney?
Yeah, Gaffney.
Yeah.
And the stop should be actually
On Berta.
yeah.
So, John, can you go back? There's a slide where we're looking the other way there.
Yeah, it is
Moving
weird.
forward.
So you're saying just move the stop sign over
Exactly,
here,
yeah.
and then
That one.
actually 180.
Yeah, so-
180 to what I'm saying is make it everything go to the right.
Yeah, if the majority of our traffic is on Gaffney, both ways,
Okay.
because of the flow of the road, and I must admit, I just sort of thought of this as we're going through these slides. I think what you're mentioning is keep Gaffney both directions, uninhibited with a stop sign, and put a stop sign at Berta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even the lay of the road,
Yeah.
and certainly the stripe helps this, but the way that road was constructed, it looks like Gaffney was there, and then at some point Berta got added onto it.
Are you saying to put the stop sign where the trash can is?
Yep.
Yep.
And remove the stop sign on Gaffney right there.
And take this
To allow both lanes on Gaffney just to proceed through, so the people on Berta then would have to stop.
instead of your striping going up to the stop sign, make it bend around and connect
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah.
So, just either make it go straight through as one street or make it go around the corner as one street.
But
Right now, it's
If you
neither.
get a stop sign here, and I know we're going deeper into this.
I know where you're going, but I think on you're coming from the other direction, what you could have and that's up on the Hulk, on a
Malala.
no, there's a Forsyth Road as you go up. There's a street where you could put a right turn permitted, so you could have a stop. Right turn is permitted. You could just go through. You don't. But if you want a straight, you would have to stop and continue. So you could fix that.
Yeah.
I think it feels like the Gaffney needs to be, that you drive it from the other side. You should treat it as that, and that would facilitate traffic. Once you close out, people will just be channeled, and they'll just drive that way.
And Gaffney is one of the designated main roads.
Yeah, it's more of a collector than.
It's a collector, I think. I think it's a
Is it
collector.
Berta or Bertha?
Berta.
And does it really get much traffic on it between?
It's the lightest leg, but we do have traffic numbers. I don't remember what those were.
It does feel though that Gaffney should
Berta
be
gets the lightest
and
out of
really
them.
truly the true road, like Vance said it. just, you get the feel of it.
So I move the stop sign over, connect the center line, take the stop away and make it just one fluid movement. And you obviously need to put some.
I'll make that motion.
Well, if you're making that curvature, maybe that stop sign could move a little bit, you know.
Well, my main point was to let you know that we have. I don't need a motion because we don't know, and that's not how we design intersections. But I wanted you to know that somebody had asked from this committee, I couldn't remember who, and we heard that. We're still kind of working through it, but I wanted to give you an update. And I think we have some opportunity with the Malala project to maybe try something out, whether it's stop here, remove the stop, or whatever we do. We're not putting a signal in or a roundabout. How's that?
I go back to my point that I don't know if it answered or not. Do we have issues at this intersection with traffic and crashes
we don't have a much of an accident history here.
Okay.
That was the other. So this doesn't really meet.
Great in theory, but maybe it doesn't solve anything
for a stop sign at all. But sometimes we get into those because they're just unique and depending on the familiarity that the community has, you know, I mean, it's definitely driver aware, right? Drivers without again, in your stop sign brochure, it'll tell you that if you approach as a driver an uncontrolled intersection, it's driver aware, right? You may have to yield or or not to an intersection. In this case here, though, it's a little bit. Feels a little bit more like a through streets, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you? In this case, there is no stop there. You can go any direction you want and not stop.
Why was the stop placed there in the first place?
I think because of a community concern, and there is a lot more traffic coming off that Gaffney Lane leg. I think it's close to meeting warrants. So the westbound's close to 2,000 trips a day.
But why wouldn't you have on the other? I think there's a street over there too.
Yeah, I think it's just the use, and I don't know. I don't know the history of that stop sign.
It's probably about 65 years old. Nobody's ever questioned it.
Except Vance Tom.
Yeah. Really.
John probably didn't want to bring this.
Shall we move on?
Yes.
I'm anxious to get this done by 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Communications. Anybody have any communications for us? Ray, were you going to ask for it in this one or in future agendas for the House Bill one?
I was going to, do you have a video to show about the House Bill, or Senate Bill 998? Yes, that's the video.
Give it a shot.
So, to explain what the new...
Is there sound?
Yeah, there's
It's supposed to be sound.
That's the problem.
If you don't have sound, I can just watch it as well. Pretty visual.
It plays through this. It doesn't play through the screen up there.
Yeah, they might be able to hear.
Can you hear this?
I can hear it.
About as much as it takes to power a light bulb. Compare this to the output of a typical car engine, which generates something like 1,000 light bulbs worth of power. A bicycle can be a practical alternative to an automobile. Bicycle's efficiency is almost entirely dependent on its momentum. A moving bicycle is operating at peak efficiency. Even as it slows, it remains efficient. It's coming to a dead stop that really saps a rider's available energy. So bike riders do their best to preserve their momentum, to make the most efficient use of their 100 watts of power. Even though they want to keep moving, most bike riders approach stop signs with extreme care, if only because they know they usually have the most to lose in a collision. Most cyclists approach stop signs with the caution they were taught in driver's ed. They slow down, they look left, they look right, and look left again. They make sure the way is clear and that they have the right of way before they proceed. Yet many, if not most, do all this while preserving some small amount of forward motion. This approach to stop signs is known as a rolling stop. The proposed Idaho stop sign law would seek to allow bike riders to treat stop signs as yield signs. It would, in effect, allow for rolling stops, making this common sense approach legal, and in doing so, encourage safe, sensible, and efficient bicycle transportation. There is no question as to the safety of the proposed law because it's based on a law that's been in effect for the last 27 years in Idaho, and Idaho's bike safety record is exceptional. Despite being a more rural state than Oregon, Idaho makes for a fair comparison because if Boise were a city in Oregon, it would be our second largest. It's important to note that neither Idaho law nor the proposed Idaho-style stop law would allow a bike rider to blow through a stop sign. Blowing through a stop is reckless, dangerous, and disregards the rights of others. Under the Idaho stop law, the fine for this offense would be even higher than it is now. Here are some examples of how the Idaho stop sign law would work in practice. At a four-way stop with other vehicles present, the bike rider yields until he or she has the right of way. At a two-way stop with heavy cross traffic, the bike rider yields until it's safe to go. At a two-way stop with low visibility, the bike rider cannot be sure the way is clear. Therefore, the bike rider yields. At any intersection with a pedestrian present, the bike rider yields. The bike rider is allowed to roll through a stop only if the way is clear of cars and pedestrians, and only if the bike rider has the right of way. In all cases, the bike rider treats the stop sign as a yield sign. The Idaho stop law would simply make it so that riding a bike would be every bit as safe as it is now, but more efficient, more enjoyable, and thus more viable as a clean, healthy, and low-impact form of transportation.
That's everything. Anyone have any questions about the law?
My only question is, did they adapt the penalties in Oregon like they did?
I haven't researched that yet,
Okay.
but I believe they did.
Because I think in practicality, especially in rural areas, it's probably a good idea, but I've biked quite a bit in Portland and seen some guys that are going way too fast and just blow through intersections one after another. So I think this is going to give them a little bit more. I think they have the right to do it a little bit more, but I think for most bikers that are paying attention, it's probably going to be okay. But I'd like to see maybe some backup. It's too bad the police officers left from earlier. We might have been able to ask them. Yeah. But yeah.
I actually did email the police chief and asked if they reviewed, any changes in, crashes or behavior between cyclists and motorists after the law. It was enacted in January 1st. So I think they're going to stay in touch with me about if there's anything they notice. But so far they haven't followed up with, any impacts. So, but yeah, I've already been communicating with them to see if there's any impacts from this law.
I would be wondering about the ratio of bicyclists to motorists in Idaho versus the bicyclists and motorists in Oregon.
Yeah. And if you looked, they'd have been the second city, but Portland was 2.5 times the size. So,
well,
yeah.
And what might be safe for one bicycle per 10,000 automobiles might not be as safe for 1,000 bicycles for 10,000 automobiles.
As long as they treat it as they understand they still yield, as opposed to it doesn't give you the right to just blow through a stop sign.
Given what I've seen of bicyclists and motorists and pedestrians, I think that's a very, very large assumption.
Are you looking for some action on this?
I was mostly just sharing that the law is going to affect January 1st, and
it's law, it's done.
Yep, and I guess keep me informed or the committee informed on if you have any concerns that you see on the street because it's a new thing. So,
Okay.
Well, thank you. It's one of those things that I think we're going to have to get used to.
Yep.
Future agenda items, anyone? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.